If you're like me, you know your mind can be your best or your worst friend. Our mind is an amazing tool that can do incredible things, but our mind can also create problems out of nowhere. Sometimes our mind keeps recommending the same solutions to problems even when they aren't working. I see this pattern play out as individuals try to overcome their anxiety, depression, or even struggles with pornography, using approaches that make sense but aren't very helpful. This podcast will show you how real researchers and clinicians are changing the way we approach mental health and reveal helpful research-supported principles designed to help real people with real problems. My name is Dr. Cameron Staley, and welcome to the Life After Series Radio.
Hello! I had a few minutes, so I wanted to share a couple thoughts with you and share a little bit more about acceptance and commitment therapy and the theoretical background behind it. So there's lots of ways to conceptualize mental health. And one way that ACT views mental health is this idea of psychological flexibility. That if we are able to respond to what the actual demands are to our environment in this moment, in the place that you're at, having the flexibility to notice thoughts and emotions and then choose your own actions, that's a good indication of solid mental health. On the flip side, we know that psychological inflexibility can predict all kinds of mental health concerns, one of which is struggles with pornography. So I wanted to walk you through what some of the concepts are that go into this concept of psychological inflexibility. One of those is how present we are in any given moment. So some folks that are really kind of locked into the past, really dwelling on previous failures or regrets or things they wish they could have done different, that past orientation can lead to lots of experiences with depression. On the flip side, people that are really focused on the future and worrying about all the what ifs, what could happen, planning for all these contingencies, worst case scenarios, turns out those folks generally experience a little bit more anxiety. So the idea to having psychological flexibility is, can you be present in this moment? So the fact that we can plan for the future and remember the past is partly a product of language. Because we can think it, describe it, it almost becomes real, where we can think about, oh yeah, what if this happens in the future? Wouldn't that be terrible? We got to plan for it. Our mind's like, yeah, this is an event that's happening now. Get worried about it. Get nervous. Let's get prepared. But really, that future doesn't exist. It hasn't happened yet. And the likelihood that it happens is probably pretty small if you think about all the contingencies we try to plan for. But because we can think it and name it, our mind treats it as real. And a lot of anxiety comes from anticipating future events that haven't even happened, but we are afraid might happen. So having that flexibility really comes back to, how connected are you to this moment? If you think about the only moment that we have is this one. All of our thoughts, emotions, connections, experiences are occurring in this moment. We can remember those and we can talk about them and rethink them, but those are really kind of a shadow of this moment. They are not the real thing. So the more that we are present focused allows us to respond to what are the demands in front of us right now in this moment. That's an indication of good health. Other aspects of psychological inflexibility are not having a clear picture on what you value most out of life. So not having purpose to guide your actions. So if you're unsure about what brings you meaning, what you're working towards, you're going to have a pretty aimless life, and your actions may not lead to the things that you want. So for a lot of folks I work with, they talk about like their goal is, I just want to be happy. As if that's the goal that you can achieve, to set a goal to be happier today. And I think about the happiness is typically a byproduct of living consistent with your values. But if you don't know what they are, happiness is really difficult to achieve. So some examples of values are thinking about what kind of relationships you want in your life, what kind of person you want to be, what kind of parent or partner or coworker or supervisor, what things you want to learn about, what kind of education you want to pursue, what kind of career do you want to have, how do you want to take care of your physical health, what do you want to do for recreation or leisure, what role does spirituality or religion play in your life. Those are often typical values that we have, and the more we're aware of those is an indication of flexibility. The more we don't have awareness of those values, more inflexibility. And along with that, some people are very aware of their values, but are having a hard time engaging in those. So if you know that you want to be a good parent, and yet you never really check in with your kids or ask them how they're doing or read them a bedtime story or take them to basketball practice, you're not really acting on that value. It doesn't have a lot of impact. So the first step is, do you know what you value? The next step is, are you living consistent with it? Are you engaging in things every day that bring you closer to that value pursuit? So thinking about being a good parent, that's something I value quite a bit. There's always more or less I could do to be a good parent. So when I come home from work and are tired from a long day of providing counseling to university students and helping them with the struggles that they have, it makes sense that I'd be like, I just need to take a break. Let me veg out on the couch. But that isn't consistent with my value of being a good father. And what I found is the more I do attend to each of my kids and their needs and take some time, that actually recharges me. Values are intrinsically rewarding. The more we live them, the more fulfilled we are. So we still need to take time for self-care and recover from a stressful day. But one of the ways we do that is living consistent with our values. Another hallmark of psychological inflexibility is struggling with our thoughts, emotions, and urges. So I think about how often we do that. Throughout the day, there's often thought patterns that I don't like. So I'm struggling with them, battling with them, trying to get rid of them. And it's kind of like wrestling with a pig, where you both get muddy and the pig loves it. Those thoughts don't go away. If anything, they get stronger and intensify. And you just kind of get wrapped up into them. So the more we struggle with trying to control thoughts, emotions, or urges, that's inflexibility. So, and that's kind of what I see often with pornography, is we have this thought that we should be able to control urges. So since we can have that thought, we believe that it must be true. Or you might have the thought that I can completely eliminate sexual urges and I will never look at pornography again. Because your mind can generate that thought, it believes it's an outcome, that you can completely eliminate urges in your life. And so I think one of the challenges with inflexibility is we overbelieve our thoughts. We believe those more than experts and science and people that have walked that path before. Because we can think it, we believe it. So traditional cognitive behavioral therapy approaches have historically tried to work on changing thoughts. So if you had a thought that wasn't very helpful for you, you would try to reconstruct that thought or challenge that thought and look at evidence. ACT takes a different approach. Or acceptance and commitment therapy says, there might be some thoughts and emotions that you are not able to change. Instead of struggling with those all the time, how about we change our relationship to them? So instead of having this thought that I'm an addict, it's all you can see, it's right in front of your face, maybe we take a step back from that thought and observe it. And as we're able to do that, it really takes away a lot of that power of that thought. So just changing the relationship to our thoughts. And how we accomplish that is through mindfulness, being aware of those and reflecting on those. Another thing that is an indication of inflexibility is allowing those thoughts, emotions, or urges to dictate actions. So really coming from a place of just reacting. So if somebody cuts you off when you're driving, you'll have that reaction of being really upset. You could be irate. That's just kind of a reaction that we have to things in our environment. But we do the same thing internally. So you have a thought, you have an emotion, you have an urge. We have a reaction to it. So a lot of folks that struggle with compulsive pornography viewing are used to that pattern. They have an urge to view, so they view. There's no space in between that urge and that action. So having psychological flexibility, you introduce that concept of awareness and mindfulness. So as you're able to notice that urge, you can describe it like, okay, where in my body am I feeling that urge? Are there any other emotions that are present? Maybe stress or boredom or loneliness. Okay, I'm noticing that urge to go to my computer, look at sexual images. Yep, that urge is there. Yep. Is that consistent with my values? Is that going to help me enhance my relationships? Or help me prepare for my chemistry exam tomorrow? Or help me become closer to God? If the answer is yes, then yeah, go ahead and follow through on that urge. If the answer is no, what could you do in this moment that's consistent with your values? And as you engage in that process of slowing down, reflecting on am I actually thinking and feeling in this moment, it unlocks the world. You can now choose to respond to urges instead of reacting to them. That is psychological flexibility, and why ACT has been so helpful with people that struggle with compulsive behaviors and don't know how they got there. There's so many things going on. There's thoughts, emotions, urges, fatigue. And when we're not aware of those, we end up engaging in behaviors over and over again that we don't want to do. Through engaging in mindfulness, awareness, clarifying your values, and then living those, we're able to respond to those things that are happening inside of us instead of having those dictate our actions. And that's huge. So psychological flexibility is a really important indication of mental health. And that's true not only for compulsive behaviors, but for depression, anxiety, trauma, OCD, you name it. Having that inflexibility is a precursor for developing struggles in all those areas. And it's interesting how that develops. What we're kind of noticing is a lot of that's a product of language. And that's what makes us unique from other species in the animal kingdom, is we have language to a really advanced degree. So they've done lots of animal studies where they work with rats and pigeons and monkeys, and they basically give them a reinforcement schedule, which means if you push this lever so many times, we'll give you a pellet of food. And so that rat or that pigeon learns that schedule of reinforcement, and they'll press that lever 10 times to get that food. And then what happens is the experimenter or researcher will change that schedule of reinforcement. So instead of 10 lever presses to get the pellet, now you have to press it 20 times in 5 minutes to get that pellet. And what we found is animals can pretty quickly adapt to, the rule has changed. I need to change my behavior to get access to that food again. They're able to do it really rapidly. You can change reinforcement schedules all day long, and within a few trials, animals can figure it out. You do that same thing with people, and instead of like, this rule isn't working anymore, let me change, they think something's broken. Maybe I need to go chat with the experimenter and see what's happening. I pressed that lever 10 times and got a treat. And now I press it 10 times and it doesn't work anymore. Something must be broken. So what's different between us and animals that can just learn that new contingency is we're able to tell ourselves a story. And that story is something's broken. I should go get help. Instead of just like, something in my environment has changed. I need to learn what that is and adapt to it. And the same things with pornography is people give you rules to try to help you, to say you need to have an accountability buddy or track how often you're viewing or get internet filters. And those rules may not be helping you. But our mind can say, somebody told me that. I've read that online. I've seen that as an example. Therefore, that must be how we overcome compulsive sexual behaviors. Our mind is just not great at recognizing, is this actually helping me change my behavior or not? Our mind just tells us stories and we listen to it. That's psychological inflexibility, is rigidly adhering to thoughts and emotions and applying them into our lives regardless of whether or not they're actually working or adaptive for the situation. So why I found ACT to be so helpful with helping people move forward with their pornography concerns is they're actually going to slow down and evaluate if your efforts are working or not. And I'm amazed how many times people have been engaging in a strategy or a technique for years to manage sexual urges. As we take a step back and look, they discover, I really thought that would work, and it hasn't worked. That's amazing that our mind hasn't said like, hey, did you notice everything I recommend you hasn't really worked? Our mind doesn't do that. It's just telling us stories. And so ACT really helps us become a better behaviorist in our own life. And what I mean by that is more sensitive to what are the actual contingencies in our environment that will allow us to manage our behavior and understand our emotions and thoughts. So I think about, instead of trying to control unwanted thoughts or urges, we want to learn how to interact with them better. That's the key thing. So I think the same thing is true as we learn to walk, where you might feel like, oh, my feet are really clumsy and my knees are knocking and my elbows get in the way and I knock stuff over. But it wouldn't make sense to be like, I need to learn how to control those movements. Instead, we learn how to navigate our environment, and we grow and we develop more coordination and we understand where we are in relation to space. And we learn that through contingencies. When we bump into things, we adjust. We learn like our stride that helps us with good balance. So we're able to do that with walking. And the goal is not to eliminate our clumsy feet or our elbows that stick out sometimes. It's to understand how they work so we can navigate our environment. The same principle applies with our thoughts and emotions and urges. Instead of feeling like they're the enemy and we need to get rid of them, let's understand the principles on how they operate so we can use them. Just like we wouldn't want to get rid of our elbows, we don't want to get rid of our thoughts. We just need to understand how to work with them. That is psychological flexibility. Stop battling with yourself and understand it better, and then you can make choices that you really want in your life. So instead of trying to control urges, start focusing on living the life that brings you meaning and fulfillment. Start understanding how these inner workings work instead of being afraid of them or trying to eradicate them or control them. And that's the secret. That's psychological flexibility. And I've seen that play out over and over. The more we can understand how we work inside, the more we have the freedom to choose the things we really want. So I hope that helps. Hope that makes sense. If you're interested in learning more, there's great ACT books out there. The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. Get Out of Your Mind Into Your Life by Steve Hayes. Are some really good ones out there to understand some of these basic ACT principles. All right. Well, I hope you have a good night.
Hey, thanks for listening. Please remember to rate and subscribe. I know you might be facing some issues in your life or know someone who is. Issues like anxiety, challenges in dealing with emotions, or other compulsive behaviors like unwanted pornography. And I know it's tough to talk to people about problems. Difficult to stare those obstacles down that we face in life and to really know how to deal with them. It's hard to know what to say and when to say it. And then when that moment you finally reach out to family and friends happens, sometimes it falls flat. I haven't found many programs teaching effective strategies like mindfulness, how to improve relationships, and ways to address unwanted pornography viewing through research-supported principles. So whether you simply want to help with a problem like unwanted pornography, difficulty responding to emotions, or just want to understand the world of someone struggling with porn a little better, head over to lifeafterpornography.com and get in on the next training. There you'll learn the exact same strategies individuals addicted to pornography used to transform their lives by implementing principles from evidence-based treatment shown effective in research for reducing unwanted pornography viewing. You'll learn the secrets, the myths, the enemies to recovery, and the LAP framework for dealing with unwanted porn viewing that we call WAVE. If that's something that interests you, click the link in the description or just head over to lifeafterpornography.com. I'm Dr. Cameron Staley. See you on the inside.